Also, for those who are interested, please check out, please, if you want lessons and whatnot, email me at george@georgefarmer.com. If you need me for recordings, do all of that. Here is Will. What's going on, Will? Can you hear me all right?
Don't hire him. Hire me. No. Hey, George.
It's so messed up.
He is farmer.
Yes, I am.
How are you doing? Hey,
I'm
George.
good. I'm very good, man. I'm so
Oh,
glad.
look at your shirt, man. Boy, do I want a shirt like that.
Yeah, check this out.
Oh
Hello.
my God. I only got my own,
Sinning Saint shirt.
my
Look, I
own
need I need a
mascot.
shirt. I need a shirt like that, by the way.
Coming soon. Coming
Yes,
soon.
please. Yes,
I
please, and
promise.
thank you. This would be
You know,
very, very
buddy,
nice.
the Budson one looks cool because it almost looks like, does it glow in the dark?
Well,
You know what I mean? That would be like, whoa.
I mean, it's Buddy, so you better believe it. It glows in the dark.
He glows in the dark. That's
Exactly. There you go. But I do have several colors of these, so yeah, I wanted to just put that out there. Anyway,
nice.
how you doing, Will? Thank you so
Great.
much for being here today. I really, really appreciate you taking the time.
Ah, good to see you. Anytime for
Yeah,
you.
same here. Same here. I already did a little introduction to the audience. We do have quite a few people watching us. We are live on Facebook, just so you know. And
Wait a minute. Is it Facebook we're live on, or is it Meta we're live on too?
I cannot keep track with this BS. Okay, so for now, I'm calling it
Whatever.
Facebook because
Live on whatever.
hello, there you go. Whatever. It's the best thing to do. I mean, I cannot possibly be bothered to even care about that. So, nevertheless, here we are. And I gave a little introduction to the audience, talking about, let's get into Will Lee's business. As we already discussed previously, you are one of the players, one of the few players who has had this incredible career over 40, 50 years, who has gone through the heyday of the New York studio scene, who has seen the New York studio scene decline to where it is now or change, because it has changed. And that's why I thought it would be interesting to have you on today and talk about business. Let's get started at the beginning. You are coming from Florida to play in the band Dreams, right?
True. Yes.
Yeah, you came up here to take the chair or the chair of that Chuck Rainey left was
That's
offered
my
to
new,
you.
yeah, that's the New York beginning. Of course, I was working.
You were working already in
I
Florida.
was working really hard before that.
Yeah, of course. There's no doubt about that. This don't mean
Beginning.
to take any of that away.
Oh, but if you want to go back, I mean, I'm just thinking about the first time I ever got paid for a gig.
Let's go into that.
Yeah, I think it was $6 a man, and I was jumping up and down. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Like, wow, this is like amazing. Of course, I could have taken the jaded side of things and gone, what are you talking about? $6 a man.
Right.
This is robbery.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, no matter what gig we're talking about, even to this day, when I walk into a room, I'm super excited
Mm.
to be there because I'm making music with other humans, which is unbelievable.
Right.
That's the greatest privilege. And also, it's not like I'm assuming I'm going to have any gigs after this gig.
Right.
I'm always thinking this is potentially the last gig, and I'm going to treat it like that because I'd be arrogant to assume
Right.
that there's another gig coming my way.
Right.
I never had that feeling. I always thought this is the place to be
Right.
because it's playing music with people. So let's make it happen.
Right.
I'm always excited about each new thing.
So basically, you have the mindset of saying, okay, well, let me not use this gig as a stepping stone. Let me get the most out of this particular moment.
There's music to be made now. So yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And
That's a cool place on earth.
that's a very, very, very important takeaway. That is, I just want to let the audience know, like that is in and of itself already, that right there is a lot to think about because that happens a lot. You have musicians come in and not necessarily think of a gig as valuable as, you know, as they should perhaps think of it. So let's jump ahead from Florida to New York. You are now in New York, because that is a scenario that a lot of people, myself included, can probably identify with. You're in a city now, and you know,
Big city.
there you go, big city, and you don't necessarily know that many people. You know some. You had a gig over here, but how did you manage like all of the ins and outs that came with that move?
Well, there was a lot of interesting accidents. I mean, I guess you could call them accidents, but you know,
Right,
the idea of running into another person and making some kind of impression is not, that's not magic or luck. That's
right,
just you uh try, you know, with your own conscience, making the best music that you know how to make
right,
and having that leave an impression on somebody, you know.
right,
In the case of the Miami thing, the reason I'm not still in Miami, because I could easily have just stayed in Miami. I had no idea that I was going to be leaving the comfort of my parents' home to come try to make a life for myself, you know,
right.
because I was living at home when I was going to college at the University of Miami. When
Mhm.
that thing happened, where the guy that I played with happened to know the people, the members of the band Dreams up in New York, and recommended me when he went
Right,
back to New York because he heard me play. We played together at a jam.
right, right.
And he said, I think I might have your guy, because they were
Mm,
looking to get a new bass player, right?
mm,
As Chuck Rainey, my idol, turns out, was leaving, even though I'd never heard of Chuck Rainey at the time. Thank God, because if I had, I wouldn't had the wisdom to not get on that plane
yeah.
and say, oh, I'm going to fill that guy's shoes. No, I'm not. I'm staying right here.
There's some big shoes to fill. It's-
Uh, I know. I mean, when I discovered who Chuck Rainey was, that's where I spent all my money that I made.
yeah,
Just fishing through all the records in the store,
yeah.
seeing if I can find his name on anything after that.
Right, right,
Because
right.
once I heard that first thing that I heard him play on, which happened to have been Reverend Lee
Mm,
by Roberta Flack, I just thought, man, this is the future for me.
yeah,
At least as a listener and a
yeah,
money spender, if not a player.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
knew where my money was going to be going.
Well, I mean, you know,
Research.
you gotta make it, and then you gotta put some back into it, and
Oh,
you gotta get information one way or the other. As
right. And
I
you have
totally
to
agree.
spend money to make money, period.
Yeah,
That's something that people that are a little bit too greedy think, I'm not spending any money to make any money. What are you,
mm,
crazy? You know,
mm.
no, you have to invest in yourself. You
There
just
you
have
go. Yeah, 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 yeah. So you're over here in Dreams. You know, I'm gonna jump through your timeline because there is, you know, a
to. Yeah, it's a
lot.
lot of years.
There's a lot of years. So and again, like what's important here is you're dealing with this business throughout this, you know, throughout your career and going forward, right? Because you've seen a lot of changes as the business evolves, as it changes, you know, as players change, as people come and go. Um, let's get into so Dreams is now a live playing situation. I take it that you're getting paid for gigs, right? I would imagine.
Yeah.
And then there is perhaps a recording situation happening with that as well, or not?
Well, I
Am
mean,
I
we did an album.
okay? There you go. There you
And
go.
I guess it probably paid scale or something.
Okay. Okay. Very cool. So
But
let's.
outside of Dreams,
Yeah.
yeah, there was, I was becoming aware of
Right.
other things that were happening, but I wasn't part of them.
Right.
I was just kind of looking at them as an outsider,
Right. Right. So
not
now.
assuming I would be part of it.
Right, right, of course. So now you managed to move into the recording work, so to speak, right?
Well,
Lab,
not because I was knocking on doors,
right,
not because I was I knew, not because I knew what to do. I mean,
right,
I knew how to do what I was doing.
right,
And members of the band were actually members of Dreams, were doing sessions.
right,
So because of those guys,
yeah,
and in the case of Bob Mann, for example, he was the guitarist. He was doing arrangements for people. So he said, I'm gonna I'd like this guy Will Lee to come in and play and sing on this commercial that I'm doing an arrangement of. In
Right.
fact, it was for Kentucky Fried Chicken. I remember it almost. I remember the whole thing.
Yeah, I would imagine
I could
so.
I could get out my
You can,
guitar and do
yeah,
it
you
for you.
can probably sing it right
No, no,
now.
it's not necessary.
No, nevertheless, but so you're starting to move into studio work. Let me ask
Right,
you,
because
is
it's a little incremental thing that happens. I mean, like for instance, in that case, I walk into the room, and of course there are other players.
right,
And that was a hello, how do you do?
right,
That was an introductory moment
right,
for me to see people outside of the band Dreams in a
right,
studio,
right,
right?
right, right, right,
So that also introduced me to the producer who was producing that thing, who also needed to have me come in the future and do another thing once in a while, even though there were people already filling those shoes. You know, there were bassists, there were
Mm-hmm,
singers.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
For some things, maybe I was the right guy,
Yeah,
and then that producer would learn that, oh, I could do other kinds of music too,
yeah,
because
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
into everything. I love music, and I love anything that grooves.
Of course, of
That's
course.
my bottom line thing, that my body wants to groove. So I
Right.
want to get into any kind of music that grooves. So
Yeah,
that leads me towards an interest in, of course, R&B and soul and funk, and of course anything else that has a feel to it of any kind,
right,
and that's most of the music that we even know about.
right,
Pop,
right. Hello.
gospel, country, you name it,
Yeah, yeah, for
it
sure.
all feels good when it feels good.
And all of that also in a very real way translates into a paycheck. Let's not forget that. Like that definitely moves into like this love of music, this love of groove, this particular how shall I put this? This particular insight into, okay, this is the most important thing right now that's ever gonna happen. Let's make it happen. All of that translates into paychecks. That's a very real takeaway, right? Let me ask you, some of these sessions, were all of these sessions union work? Were they partially union work? Is there a percentage perhaps that can be taken from that?
Well, absolutely. The daytime stuff was all union work. All the
Okay.
studio stuff was union work. Every
Yeah.
records and commercials were all union work.
Yeah.
Um, you know, which is a huge benefit to be getting a union check. There's a
Yeah.
huge, especially an after benefit to that,
Yeah.
where when you get into like pension time,
Hmm.
you put money into this into yourself the whole ride.
Right.
So those union things are a lifesaver for people
Oh
when
yeah.
when they get older and they need to get, like, you know the
No,
kids are gone, say,
absolutely.
then.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. No, this that my next question was going to be, was this something that the players back in the day and even today, I mean today I also know that, but was that something that you guys sought out?
Of course, yeah,
Yeah.
there were lots of discussions, meetings,
Yeah.
negotiations about
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff that made it possible to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Most
there
definitely.
had to be some kind of plan coming from somewhere, and it really came from the musicians themselves. When
Yeah.
when you really boil it down to
Yeah.
who's in the union, who's making these decisions.
Yeah, yeah, it's all
Yeah.
musicians. There's no two ways about that.
Mhm.
Um, when we first spoke about you had a great piece of advice that I believe Don Grolnick gave you some time ago, and I was wondering if you could repeat that for the audience because it's so specific and it's just a great piece of advice for people coming into the city or starting anywhere or being in the middle anywhere.
Well,
Um,
Don Grolnick was a guy who was a very practical thinking guy. And if
yeah,
you hear his compositions, you can sort of hear that in his music.
right.
That's why guys like James Taylor tapped him to be his producer,
Yeah,
and all that kind of stuff. He was just a really logical player and thinker in a
yeah,
way, with a great sense of humor too.
yeah.
He's the guy that told me, okay, how do you decide how much floss to take out of the floss thing? Well, you do this. One arm length from here to there. That's the amount of floss that you can use with your floss. Okay. That same guy,
Works every time.
right? That same logically thinking guy said something. You probably heard this before from other people, but the first time I ever heard it was from Don, and it was like, in your career, in your money making career, try to make sure that you're making your month's rent each week.
Each week.
If you
Exactly.
can make your month's rent as your weekly amount of money that you're making,
Yeah.
then you're going to do okay otherwise, because down, that through going through all the other expenses you have to deal with,
Yeah.
that thing is taken care of, and then you still have money. If you're still making that same amount of money next week and the next week and the next week, that means
Yeah.
you're going to be eating, you're going to be maybe even putting some away in the end.
There you go. There you go. So that I thought like that's a monumental insight, right?
And it doesn't take a genius to figure out what that
What
amount
that
is. You
number
know what
is. Yeah.
rent is, or if you're looking for a place to start spending money on rent, make sure that you can cover that in a week, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. So that in and of itself, and it doesn't really, I'm going to add to that. It doesn't really matter, how you're going to make that money, and as long as you don't hurt anyone. I should
Oh
add.
yeah, I mean,
But
not
as long as you make
illegal.
no, as long as you're making the money, your month rent in 1 week every week, you're good to go. Like you have, and then of course you're gonna have to work your butt off one way or the other. There's no two ways about it. Coming back to the recording stuff. Now, okay, you are now recording over here, over there. In the intro to today's video, I tried coming up with a bunch of songs that you did, and the list goes on and on. There's no doubt about that. What I would like to
Crawl
find,
Space by Art Farmer.
yeah, exactly. That's one of the songs that I played.
Did you mention?
Yeah, I
Oh,
did.
that's great. That's a good
That,
record, man.
I mean, that was my introduction to your sound. Because let's not forget that came out in '74. I'm born in '72. 74, 75. We had just moved into our house where I grew up. And I remember the picture of the album cover hanging next to the piano. That was, it was that fresh. It totally came out, and years later I realized that, whoa, the band is just killer on this. There's just no two ways about that. It was a big deal. So, and for a long time, that was my definition of a bass sound, of an electric
Hmm.
bass sound, I should say. But coming back to the recording stuff, uh, let's see, because there's always been a lot of urban myths about what's called mailbox money, right? Money that you get through residuals, through points on recordings, and all of that. Is there any insight that you can share what that is concerned? Perhaps a percentage of mailbox money versus the money that you get directly from a recording and all of that.
Well, all I know is, like, don't even think about the mailbox money.
Yeah,
I mean, think about it when you are getting paid. Think about, is this going on record? Is this a cash under the table thing, or is this
right,
going to be something that's on the books, which usually that means that there will be some record of it, and that
right,
means there will be a possibility of receiving some other monies, like in the future. For
right,
instance, um, there are these neighboring rights things that are possible in some countries, um, like Brazil and other European countries, and um, other smaller countries to an extent, have this thing built in for artists that support, um, giving them some monies
hmm,
for music of theirs that they had performed on. Not that they wrote it at all, just stuff that you have been a part of,
right,
that have been like, uh, broadcast, say.
right, right.
That's probably one of the bigger surprise monies that you can actually get from doing legitimate gigs,
Right, 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 right,
as opposed to under the table gigs,
right, right.
because there's no mailbox money, or as my wife and I call it, burping and farting money. Because you're basically getting paid to burp and fart. It's like, whoa,
Right.
shit, I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that money to come in. What have I done to get that? Oh yeah, many years ago, I
Right.
did a session. Oh yeah, and there it is. They give you a readout and you see what it is.
Yeah.
Could be like a movie too.
Yeah. 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 Most definitely.
Interesting.
No, what I found interesting is like you really don't necessarily think about the the residuals in the moment of recording. You don't necessarily think about, you know, is this going to get me somewhere else? It's really just all about this moment. Is that correct?
It is the thing that I had this discussion with Verdine White. We were, you know, he was like 18 when he started making those beautiful records with Earth, Wind, and
Mm,
Fire, right?
right.
And the discussion we were having had everything to do, and this is going a little bit off on a tangent, but it's all
Mm,
related. It had everything to do with um, where you are when the red light comes on,
mm,
when the recording is happening. Do you panic
right.
and go, "Oh my God, this is going to be this is going to be a part of history. This is permanent. You know, I can't." And,
And do
and
you
you're not
choke
going
up?
to,
Yeah, yeah,
and you're no longer in the moment, and you're not doing the greatest job you can do. So you have to just really forget about all that and
right,
forget about any future monies and just make sure that this moment is grooving,
right.
because what I've discovered is, you know, like I'll be able to go back to like the Art Farmer Crawl Space album and listen to it and realize that even though that was a million years ago,
Right,
it still feels good because a groove is a groove is a groove
right,
forever.
right.
If you're grooving now,
Yeah,
it that's possible that it can be enjoyed many, many decades later, you
right,
know, because it
right.
felt good then and it feels good now. And it conversely, of course, if it felt like crap then, it's going to feel like, you know, 50 years later crap now. And that's pretty, that's
It's
bad.
not getting better.
Hey, another thing that I thought of, you know, another sort of rule of thumb that I kept hearing, I knocked over my garbage can, um, that I remember Hiram Bullock saying over and over again, whenever I would get like frustrated about the money that was coming in for a gig or something, you know, like, oh man, they're paying us really badly
Mm.
or something. He would always repeat, well, if you really want to make money, be a banker. You know, if you're doing music for the money, well, good luck, you know, because there's just no guarantee that's, you know, that you're going to be a hugely rich person to begin
Right,
with.
right, right, right. No, there's a time investment that I don't really see happening in any other job world or business or labor world. Let me put it this way, because you know our days, if we can squeeze 15 hours out of the day where we're awake and productive, we will do that, right? In what other job do you actually see that, right? There's 8 9 hours. There's a level to where you can be very productive or where you can make decisions or whatever. The musician's life is not
Yeah.
like that.
There are no weekends.
There you
There's
go.
no days off, really.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
just like you're doing it all the time,
yeah,
you know, and it's good
yeah,
because an enjoyable thing to be doing. You know,
yeah,
it's not like you're just not splitting rocks
yeah.
on the
Exactly,
side of a highway in a chain
exactly.
gang, hopefully.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's very, very important to keep that in mind. And I think again, like I'm gonna repeat myself, because I want the audience to know that here's someone who has, you know, this entire length of a career, right? So it's important to perhaps get some takeaway, get some insights from that perspective. It's very, very yeah, aside from it being inspirational, but it's also uplifting because people can hopefully see some parallels to their own lives, because that is very important to realize. Let's move ahead just a little bit from the studio work. Also, how did the change of the studio scene, how did that translate in terms of paychecks, in terms of shows, or in terms of gigs for you? Like, what did that feel like? What did it look like?
Well, it definitely opened up my schedule in a way
Okay,
to do other things,
there you go.
but you know, it was a very gradual, and you know, it's probably a lot easier to adapt to something that's being gradually changing rather than
Right,
something that's an instant like shock to your system kind of a thing.
right, right.
So you started to adapt to all that stuff, and I do want to say that Luckily for me, I had gotten used to a single gig here and a single gig there, and maybe a thing here, and maybe an empty space here for a while, and maybe another gig comes in, and then a sporadic. It was
Yeah.
all spotty, because it was always one-offs. It was always like one session
Yeah.
or performance at a time. I wasn't part of a touring band,
Right.
not much. I mean, I did a few small things, but that wasn't my life either. My life was basically in the city, taking one-offs for a
Right.
long, long time. And then I get this phone call from Paul Schaefer about this TV pilot that was coming up that he was going to be a part of and wanted me to be a part of the band.
Right.
And that was the Letterman show. And like I said, it wasn't a established anything. It was just a pilot, and it was 13 weeks of work the first time around. Before anything got renewed, it was like here's a 13-week commitment.
Right.
And I couldn't believe my ears and my luck. 13 weeks of solid work. Wow.
Incredible.
I've never experienced anything like this before,
Right. Right.
So that turned, of course, into the next 13 weeks contract, and then a 6-month contract, and then a 3-year contract, and then a 33 and a third years later. So you just never know. But I do think it's really like healthy to be a part of if you can get a steady gig,
right?
If you can start working your way into friendships with people like George Farmer, who know what's happening on the Broadway scene. Or, you know what I mean? Why not? You might just not you particularly, but yourself and many other people that are involved in that world where subs are needed.
Yeah.
And if you're great, if you work hard to be as really good of a musician as you can, and you find yourself around a town like a great city like LA or New York or places that have this kind of theatrical scene going on, or just a place of culture, like a big city with culture, where they have orchestras and they have bands.
Yeah.
It's really, really good to try to get into that scene if you can, because that means all these other great benefits like insurance, pension later on, and all that other kind of legitimate stuff that really set your life up in a really great way.
Yeah. And that comes in very, very handy. On top of that,
don't bother George. He's
no, please.
Guy. But if you see him in a club, go over to him and start being friends.
Buy me a drink.
Get really close. Make sure you have lots of Tic Tacs in your mouth. Don't gross him out. Get in his face and say, "Hey, man, put your mask on, of course, George.
Give me a cake." No.
You ever need a sub?
Listen, I get those emails a lot, and I let everyone come in. Okay, I have an open door, so I know that I'm totally in the minority what that is concerned, but I don't say no to anyone. And
you also don't want to be. You'd rather hear somebody play than have them tell you I'm great. So get yourself in the public eye, really.
What I'm thinking is that in the end, that decision whether somebody gets to sub for me, right, is not really up to me, because the one person who's not there, who's not in the band and not at the show or not at the gig when my sub is playing, is me. So I don't get to make that decision. I'm not the one who says, "Well, you sounded great," because usually I'm not there, right? I do rely on MDs and arrangers and people who have that authority to kind of tell me, yeah, this player sounded great, this player not so much, But who am I to say no? I've had so many people say no to me. On the one hand, it fuels your ambition and it fuels your focus and whatnot, but on the other hand, it's also tiring to say no. So this is where I get to be lazy, because if I say yes, it's a lot easier. It's just, let's face it,
It's better than being said no to.
Yeah, that
in a
for
way.
sure. That's for sure. So, and if everything works out, I get a great sub and the sub gets a job and gets another makes connections, and
And hey, man, I was just thinking about how wonderful it is to have a gig like that, because once you have a gig like that, you know, there's a rule where you can sub out.
yeah. Yeah.
So you can keep your musical life diverse. You can still go out and do some other things.
Well, that was gonna be my next, like, you're
Right?
just taking the segue right out of my mouth. Here's because with the Letterman show, you have a steady schedule. If I remember correctly, you guys were recording every day at 5 in the afternoon, something like that.
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah. So that means that everything before that, with the exception of perhaps a rehearsal period, and everything after that is at your own discretion, right?
It's your time. Yeah.
There you go. So, on top of the steady work that is just happening every day, you do have all of this other time that you can fill up with whatever you want to do, whatever you get called for, right?
I
And
used to do that too, because some people in the band didn't really do anything else but that.
yeah,
And some of it was by choice,
yeah,
and some of it was because they didn't have all the connections and stuff.
right, right,
But man, I just love music. So I want to just play, you
right,
know.
right,
So
right,
I
right.
would fill up that time with
Yeah,
with other things.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Now that is an important takeaway in my opinion, because you do notice, and I can't help but compare it a little bit to the Broadway scene or the theater, musical theater world, where you do run into characters where the instrument does not come out unless the lights go on in the theater, right? And it's not because for a lack of connections or because they couldn't do it. It's just there's an unwillingness to invest anything aside from this particular work. You do see that in classical music as well, quite a bit.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fine.
you know, to each their own. There's,
Absolutely.
what can you do? What I always found interesting is running from one gig to the next. And from what I understand, again, I wasn't there back in the day, but that's what all of you players did, running from one studio to the next, getting a session in, getting up to 4 sessions a day. And I do compare that a little bit to being a sub, because as a sub on Broadway, you can be in that situation. You can play up to 2, sometimes even 3 shows a day, depending on when they are happening, and you do end up running from one theater to the next. It's
Wow.
great. It's great. It
Have you done
feels.
that?
Oh yeah, many 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 times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. There's and if it all works out, even if it doesn't work out, it's great. It feels awesome. It's a rush, of course, to your system. Um, but at the end of the day, you're so tired you can't think anymore. But you will have kicked butt all over the place. I mean, that is a great takeaway, and that's a great feeling to have. And you know lest we forget, like, you're playing great music all the time. Okay, so that's an important takeaway right there. Let me ask you this, with the Letterman show, because it's important to sort of frame this in terms of professional um, uh, professional milestones, so to speak. Was that a union gig? Was it not? Well, this, I mean, I
Well,
set that up myself. But was that a union gig? Did it become a union gig? What was the difference between it being union or non-union, if there was?
I believe that from the pretty much the beginning, as far as I can remember, it
Mhm.
was a it was a combination.
Okay.
We would
Okay.
make a contract that satisfied the union
Yeah.
uh, rules and regulations about doing a thing like that, a show.
Yeah.
And we would also, I think we got paid on top of that something.
Right. Right.
I
Right.
believe
Right.
that's what we worked out with everybody.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, that's,
Or
you know, and that's an important takeaway right there, because it does speak to the importance of the union. It does speak to, you know, the union numbers are declining, and that's not a good thing, right? So if more of us join the union will be stronger,
Mhm.
will continue to be strong. Um, let's move ahead to your life after Letterman. I mean, Letterman show is a huge deal, 33 and a third years. That's, you know, you cannot necessarily bypass that easily, yet you have, and you're one of the players who are always playing, right?
I
So
think
take,
that's why I'm still playing, because I continued all those relationships and all those, you know, being present and being in the public eye kind of outside of the show
yeah,
while the show was happening.
yeah, yeah, most definitely.
I just stayed there and stayed with that.
Exactly, exactly. You said a very important thing right now, and that is continuing the relationships even when you have this steady gig. What does that mean for you?
It just means that, I was, for me, I mean, it was just, it wasn't anything I really was like scheming about, planning,
Yeah,
it was simply that I just love the whole scene,
yeah,
I love music, and I continued to, I was never satisfied with just doing the Letterman show,
yeah,
so I always made sure that I was filling my time with what I like to do the most, and that is try to get involved in playing wherever possible.
yeah.
Stay involved.
Your enthusiasm for music has never waned, and I think
That's right.
that's a very very important takeaway right there, because that, you know, if people are looking for a long career, for a long term career, that might very well be one of the one of the pillars that a lot of players who have had a long career, that they share that pillar, that enthusiasm for music. That's just not going away. And if you lose it, things are going to get a little dicey, I would imagine. Nevertheless, let's move on into the life after the Letterman show, right? I still remember the very first time I got the Fab Four email, or maybe even like a postcard um, advertising a gig. At the time, you guys were playing Bowery Ballroom, um, among many other venues here in the city. But that, from what I understand, has turned into a money making enterprise. Is that correct?
Money making and money spending,
Yeah.
insurance, workers' comp, storage of the instruments, cartage,
There
all
you
that
go.
kind of stuff that we would truck our entire gear out to LA for a gig and back. We
That's
never
crazy.
toured. We never did like the tour thing, because I don't. First of all, I was doing Letterman for most of those years of the Fab Four. I
Right.
was still doing that thing. So, and Jimmy Vivino was doing Conan, of course, and
I was just going to say, like, you're not alone in that.
yeah. So luckily we kind of rested on each other's you know uh, careers as people that were sort of already taken.
Right.
And
Right.
it's funny because the fact that we had those careers gave us enough visibility for the Fab Four to actually get somebody's attention, because, oh, the guys from this thing and this thing are in that band, so go see them.
Right.
The guy from the
Right.
Letterman show and the guy from the Conan show, they're in that band, so the band really got a momentum from the beginning based on the fact that we were sort of known. The other guys in the band were not really that known, you know,
Yeah.
and became more known because of the Fab Four.
Of course. Of
Way.
course. And in the meantime, it has, you know, like you guys are almost out like every weekend, from what I understand.
We
Or
did. We used to do that. Yeah.
yeah.
It got so expensive that we ended up having to sort of uh, say no to the crap gigs.
Mm.
We would,
Of-
because we would do like really hard, gigs where you have to drive way too far,
mm.
and they wouldn't pay enough money for us to have our horns and strings with us. So
Yeah.
I tried to put an end to that, because
Yeah. It's just
we were schlepping too hard just to keep those expenses paid.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, most
instead of
definitely.
Yeah, instead of doing that, we got rid of the expenses.
Well, I mean, at some point you gotta move on from certain things to another level, so to
Right.
speak.
So it's good in a way because it keeps the quality level of the shows high.
Okay.
You know? And to me, that's really, I think that's really important because we can do this thing. We have all these arrangements with horns and strings, and let's do that,
Yeah.
instead of just bashing out a bunch of Beatles songs in a club.
Yeah. Most definitely. No, I totally get that, and I find it fascinating that this conversation, even though we are talking about business, always comes back to the love of music. It always comes back to let's just make the best music that we can possibly make. All right.
Absolutely.
I mean that is an interesting takeaway right there, and I hope that the audience gets that to a certain degree because that's a big takeaway right there. All right. Um, you when we first talked about doing this live video, you had a great I don't want to say rule of thumb, but because coming to your work as an MD right now, because you do kids rock, you do Love Rocks New York City, you do East Meets West as an MD and a bass player, right? And you had a great way how to divide up. Okay, this is what I'm getting paid. Am I getting enough? Am I getting too much? Am I getting too little? Take us through that calculation real quick because I thought that was brilliant.
Well, I don't even know what I told you, but what I'm thinking right now is that, it's a sliding kind of scale in a way, and you have to sort of make it up as you go along.
Right.
Because I don't know if there's a real set amount that you get for.
Let
Okay,
me let me just
it,
let me just interject real quick. What you pointed out was the hours spent versus minimum wage.
well,
The hours
yeah, I mean,
spent like this I spent X amount of hours. This is what I'm getting paid. Let's divide that through that amount and see how that holds up against minimum wage. And I thought that was brilliant.
well, you don't want to get minimum wage, so that's not a great negotiating thing unless you decide, okay, look, if you're able to tell the person that's hiring you, and if you can, first of all, you have to prove that the time and expertise that you're putting into what this is in order to create
Yeah.
something that's going to end up sounding great on stage.
Yeah.
That's a that can be a lot of work
Right.
to really do it right.
Yeah.
And I found that I was talking, say you're doing a show with basically all the shows you're talking about are shows that have to do with a house band
Yeah.
backing up multiple artists
Right.
from different all kinds of different artists, right? In a big show, and most of the time that show is for profit to make, sometimes it's a charity, sometimes it's just a big, like in the case of East Meets West, it's just an entertaining show because
Right.
Japanese people, this is in Japan, and Japanese people are very open-minded about like all kinds of, they're like me. They
Right.
like great music, from different walks of life. They're not going to just go, oh, I only like rap. They're
Right.
not going to be that person. They're going to be like very open-minded.
Right.
So there's that. But then the other kinds of shows, you know, you're lucky if you can talk to the artist.
Right.
You have to do so much second guessing because sometimes there are agents, managers involved that only want you to speak to them and never touch my artist, until.
Yeah.
And so, in other words, by the time the artist finally hits the stage and you've set up all this music for them with your band,
Right.
you've had to do a lot of homework
Yeah.
to see just what's going to make this artist comfortable when they walk in.
Right.
So all the notes have to be right. It has to be a current arrangement that they're familiar with. It can't be something that they did 25 years ago or
Right.
even 4 years ago.
Right. Right.
It's got to be something that they're going to walk in feeling at home with, right?
Right.
And all that kind of psychology and musicology and guesswork and
Yeah.
hopefulness and whatever you want to call it.
Prayers.
Yeah, and notes
Yeah.
and individual notes for the horns, for the
Yeah.
background singers, for all the instruments in the band
Yeah.
have to be pretty on point. Like
Yeah.
the second that artist hits the stage, They got
Right.
to be pretty much there.
Yeah, it's got to sound like they've always played with that particular artist.
That's right.
Yeah.
Even better if we can get
Even,
away with it.
yeah.
So that happens a lot. Sometimes the artists turn around and go, "Whoa!" They can't believe it,
Right.
and that's because the time that anybody sees me doing this music, I'm already having dessert. My work happened a long time ago, but it happened over many, many months.
Right.
I've been working and putting those hours in.
Right.
So the better you can explain that, I know I've already told your audience more than I've told, anybody who's paying me. But I've just put you through how tedious and how much toil and work is really involved in getting it to a certain quality level.
Yeah, but it's
If you can
important to.
explain that to the person paying you,
Yeah.
then you have a little bit of negotiation power to
Right.
to make them realize, okay, well, the result was really great and we
Right.
appreciate it. And
Right.
we're gonna show you that next time by
Mm.
giving you more.
Yeah. Yeah.
By
Yeah.
paying.
Yeah. No, that's such an important takeaway. That's such an important insight right there. This the amount of time that you spend in that you put into the product needs to be calculated and needs to be held in comparison to
There's
the
some kind of
outcome.
wage scale, right?
Yeah, yeah, of
Yeah.
course,
I
of course.
mean, like we were talking about earlier, there are really no days off for
Yeah,
musicians. And that's a big part. There are no hours off. When
yeah,
you get into a thing like that,
yeah,
it
yeah.
becomes just around the clock for months.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, because this is sort of also kind of, has to do with the business side of things. Now we know you're very happily married right now to Sandrine, wonderful couple.
Whoop.
Sandrine Lee,
Oh,
your wife.
I got
Hello.
rid of her, man. I got a
No.
turtle.
But
Go with it.
you are in this relationship together, which means that you are also doing financial decisions together. You're working
Oh, man.
together, so to speak.
She's the smart one when it comes to money. Believe me, we're a team, but she really takes care of, makes sure. She actually helps me because I'm not like a guy who's able to get on the phone and say, yeah, I'm not worth that much money. Just give me less. That's me.
Right.
I'm really bad at, I don't have a representative and I'm not that great at negotiating for myself. But
Right.
she's a person who gives me perspective and helps me realize my worth,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that in
Good
and
to
of
have.
its, yeah, that's such an important takeaway. I very much feel the same way about my partner. It's so important to realize that, and as you just said, you also listen to her, right?
All the time.
There you
She's
go.
fascinating to listen to.
Well, I mean, that's
She's
that's
well read.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah, 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 yeah.
There's a lot of stuff.
Well, I mean, that's right there. That's a huge takeaway. So if you have a good partner out there, listen to them. Let them in. Work it out together. This is
Yeah,
important.
be stimulated by them. Don't ignore.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Don't
yeah. Most
don't say, "Oh
definitely.
man, I can't listen to you. I'm trying to do something right now." Listen
Yeah,
to them because they might help what you're doing happen.
there you go. There you go. So that's an enormous takeaway. I think that's very, very important. Listen, we're getting questions here. Is there any way to buy the Sinning Saint T-shirt?
Oh, there. This is
A
I don't know
one-off?
what I'm going to do, but this is a mock-up. I'm going through like 3 or 4 different t-shirt companies to see who's got like the nicest fabric and the nicest, something that doesn't feel like a big patch of paint on your chest.
Right, right,
I'm
right,
just
right,
going
right.
through all this stuff right now. So soon there will be, if you
Get
really want to do that.
get in touch with Buddy, because these I don't know whether he's involved with these T-shirts. He told me about, or through various channels he told me about them. But get in touch with Buddy. These T-shirts are really nice, by the way.
And the Sinning Saint is going to be a character in the new music video of mine coming up soon too.
Perfect.
Cool.
Awesome. So I mean, we're getting to the end of our hour together. But I did wanted to
Anyway, yeah, my website. You can reach me through my website, by the way.
well, there you go. I mean, now we got that out of the way, so everybody just turn it all off and goodbye. But willlee.com, check that out. Check out Will on all of his social media outlets. There's a lot of it out there. let me ask you what you got going on. What's coming up?
Let's see, what am I working on right now? I just finished a gig with 2 nights ago with Billy Gibbons and Southside Johnny and the Blind Boys of Alabama and some really great country artists.
Right.
I don't know if you know of a guy named Jason. What's his last name? Never mind. He's got a song called "Buy Me a Boat."
Okay.
Good old Jason. I can't believe I'm spacing on his last name. Anyway, we worked together
Yeah.
and we had a great time with all that stuff. And it was a nice house band.
Right.
And I got to play with Anton on that. Anton was called for that gig too. We had a great time together.
Nice, nice. How does it
So
feel to after all these years? I mean, 3 decades. Like, you guys were. You understand that Anton was not with the Letterman band throughout the entire run, but through most of it, from what I understand, right? What's the takeaway there? How does that unique hookup feel like to you?
um um the the after effects are getting back together with Anton.
Well, getting, the after effects and getting back together. So in other words, now the show has already closed, right? The show doesn't exist anymore, but now you walk into a session and there is Anton.
It's just like, it's just like there was no time in between.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
like we played together yesterday.
Yeah.
I noticed that right away when we did an Oz Noid show together,
Right.
and it was just so natural feeling. It was we both knew exactly what to do and
Yeah.
where to place the notes and all that stuff.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Anton's kept his chops up like crazy because I don't know if you know, but basically the day that the Letterman show ended, Anton was on a bus the next day for the next 5 years with Joe Bonamassa.
I heard.
So he
Yeah.
kept
Yeah.
his
Of
chops
course.
burning the whole time. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Of course. I saw Joe Bonamassa maybe 2.5 years ago doing the Beacon Theater. My friend Roger got me tickets, and Anton, I believe,
shout out to Roger.
yeah, Roger's a cool dude. There's just no two ways about that. Um,
That had to be great.
oh, it was fantastic. It was really good. It was really good, and I didn't know what to expect at the time. I had never seen him live or anything. It was really good, and they managed to get the place sounding really good. So, every now and then you go to concerts and it's like, oh man, you're just like, you get that kind of sound. That was not one of those situations. It
If
was
you get a good
totally,
mixer, the Beacon can sound really good.
oh yeah, I would imagine
Abfo
so.
we have a great mixer that makes the Beacon sound really good. And we'll
So,
be playing there next a week from tomorrow. We'll be playing there November 6th.
so there you go. So the Beacon Theater, Fab Four, November 6th. Important gig to check out. Good gig to check out. Always a good time.
And you
Um,
know what, man? The next night, the night after that, I'm going to be singing four songs with Chrissy Poland at the City Winery, and the event is the music of Bob Dylan and Paul Simon.
get out.
Every artist is doing 2 Dylan songs and 2 Simon songs.
It's an interesting
I'm not going to
combination.
yeah,
That is
because I think they're both having a big milestone birthday at the same time.
right, right. I think they're turning 80. Is that right?
That's a big milestone birthday.
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
there's a lot of music. There's a lot of music. There was a time in my life where I listened to Spirit of the Saints every day.
Wow.
Paul Simon's album.
That's a
Every
really
day.
good.
The entire album, because it's still sort of the benchmark of what you can do with an album, how good you can make an album sound. Like, it's unbelievable.
Hey,
But listen,
what just happened to me a minute ago was what used to happen to me every day of my life. I couldn't remember Chris Jansen's last name, the guy that did Buy Me a Boat. He's a
oh,
fantastic country artist, right?
Chris Jansen. Okay.
And I just remembered like what it was, during those crazy session days where you would do between 4 and sometimes even 8 sessions a day in New York. Because the studios were so close together,
Right.
you could actually make it to the next one in time.
Right.
It
Right.
wasn't like Los Angeles where it's all spread out and you kind of you just kind of set up a tent in
Right.
the studio and live there for, you know,
Yeah.
through many meals. Um, New York was a whole different scene. You know, we didn't have that much in the way of cartage. We have our instruments on our back and we just shoot in, shoot out,
Mm,
and do these things. But after the session was over, even if I had just spent an hour singing the same lyrics over and over again for a spot about some product like Teddy Grahams or whatever the hell it was,
right. Right.
you just start singing and wow, you really got into it and you got the thing, the word pronunciation just right, and then you leave the thing and people would say, "Oh, you just did a jingle? You were singing? Oh, what was it for?" And you'd go,
No idea.
"Uh, yeah, yeah." Or how did it go? How'd the song go? You know, I don't know. I can't remember. I'm on to the next thing. I'm just like,
Your mind is already focusing on the next piece of music. It's long gone by the time you do find. I also find that when you are in situations like that, um, you're trying to stay in the moment. You're trying to do exactly what you're supposed to do, but very often you also have to, out of necessity, divide up your mind and think ahead, right? And
that's
be at the next session, right? And be okay. I need to pack up. I got 30 seconds to pack up because I know very well, and this is coming from the life as a sub on Broadway. I know very well if I pack up, I'm on 44th Street. I pack up my stuff in 30 seconds. I can make it through the crowd in 2 minutes to the Imperial Theater, or I can go to the whatever it might be. It doesn't really matter.
you know just how long it takes to get there, like to the second.
To the second.
I remember one time the worst thing happened. I was leaving a bass session, going to a singing session, and I left my bass in the trunk of the cab.
Oh.
Luckily, I had a receipt, so
Okay.
I was
Okay.
able
You
to
were.
track it back down. But wow, like that was a really good instrument too. It was like,
Mm,
oh, no, 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 you didn't just do that.
mm. Oh man,
Possible.
that's yeah. That turns the little remaining hair that I still have. It makes it stand up.
You
It's
can still
terrible.
tell the weather with that thing.
Exactly.
Yes,
Well,
clear, partly cloudy with a chance of thunderstorm. Wind from the northeast.
yeah, it's still happening. But listen, Will, I want to thank you so much for making
Thank
yourself
you, George, and
available
thanks
today.
everybody for tuning in. Yeah,
Yeah, of
hope you got
course.
something out of this. I don't know.
No, I think again, like the takeaway here is, or one of the takeaways is, to make a career out of this, to make a career out of being a musician. Of course, there needs to be, you need to have your shit together. You need to know the music. You need to know all of that stuff. But maybe even taking it as one step below that, or one step deeper than that, your love for music and your enthusiasm for music cannot falter. There's just no two ways about it. And if
There's a
it
couple of things to keep in mind too, because it's really attractive to say yes to everything. And
right,
just in case you happen to be lucky enough to get asked to do things that you know, more than what you're already doing. If
right,
you get multiple things to be asked to do, first of all, don't get frustrated when you can't do something due to already having another thing. That's a problem I ran into many times. And Ralph McDonald was a really dear friend of mine, and he told me some words that really have saved my sanity many times. He just said basically, you can't make all the money,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
And that has like kept me from being really frustrated a lot of times. Just
yeah,
remembering that if Ralph said that, that's good enough for me.
yeah, 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 yeah,
It's
yeah,
also
yeah,
so true. I mean, you just can't, it's not physically possible to be everywhere at the same time.
yeah,
And the other thing is that as tempting as it is to say yes to every gig that comes in, um, I have learned that the $50 gigs, which are important to do, but don't get so excited about doing every one of those, because I've learned that the $50 gigs basically can lead to more $50 gigs most
yeah,
of the time. They
yeah,
can also give you they can also give you visibility.
Yeah.
And if you, that one person's in the house that night that says, wow, I didn't know that this guy could play like that, or he sounded really good. He really made the band sound good, or
Mm.
whatever it is. That's also important to do some of those, but don't like limit yourself to,
Yeah.
don't get too, make sure, just keep a check on that.
Oh
If
yeah.
you happen to be in a town where there's a lot of little tiny gigs here and there, don't get so into the circuit of that you have lost the ability to do, the other circuit,
Yeah.
which is like the more lucrative circuit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
In other
Yeah.
words, it's all about balance, and you just have to just keep that in check.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Most definitely. This
Do,
it's go ahead.
yeah,
Go ahead.
do a diverse thing if you have it in you to do that.
Yeah.
Try to be diverse.
Yeah.
Do everything.
Yeah. 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 No, I
Not all at
mean
once.
this everything, but not all at once. That's a good takeaway right there. Anyway, Will, listen, I'm gonna say goodbye for now.
Thank you.
I hope
Thanks.
I see you soon, perhaps at the bitter end, perhaps somewhere else. And let me just sign off and say goodbye to the audience with the sentence that I say every time, and that is be cool, be kind, and remember we only have each other. All right. Thanks so much, Will. Take care.
Thanks, man.
All right.